Hello, Delia. Welcome to Talks.
Hi, Belinda.
Did you bring tea with you today?
I know. I've got coffee. Here we go.
Coffee drinker.
I have to have my 2 cups of coffee first thing in the morning. I can't
function. You are the program lead for fashion design, MA fashion design, and I wanted to know when did you realise that you wanted to work in fashion?
Oh, when I was 9, probably, like forever. I think when I was younger, so when I was about 9, I wanted to be either a fashion designer or a midwife.
Okay.
Because I was obsessed with babies.
Or a very fashionable with midwife.
Yeah, exactly. But I was obsessed with like medical programs, and if I was ever off sick from school, I would always watch, medical programs, or they would have programs, with somebody giving birth or something, and I just thought that was amazing. And until I was 18, I was half and half. Do I go to art school or do I go to nursing school? Which is completely mad. And so for my A-levels, I did chemistry and art and French. So yeah, completely mad. But in the end, I just had to go to art school. There was no choice. I didn't have a choice. And it was
was that because of your gut, because of your instinct, you felt you okay.
There was nothing else and I could do. And I thought, and actually when I applied, because you do a foundation year and then you apply to university, I applied to university and I was thinking, oh, shall I do textiles, because fashion design is so competitive, and I was a bit worried, and I really thought about that. And then I thought, no, I can't. I can only do fashion design. That's all that's all I've ever wanted to do. It's all I've done. It was weird, really. So, so yeah, I did that. And then I think I've been quite fortunate because, so I was at university in the 80s, which was amazing. I loved the 80s. And when you're not aware of it, but actually when I look back, I think, oh, so lucky, no computers, really cool. Like, it was just amazing. But, even then fashion design was competitive. I know it's even more so now, but I think I've just been really fortunate because I left college, went to work in a buying office actually, but have always worked in the fashion industry as a designer after that. I've never done anything else. That's all I've ever done my entire career.
And what brands have you worked for? I mean, was your role fashion designer, or did you have other roles?
I started in a company called E-Town, which I don't think even exists anymore.
I remember that store.
Huh?
I remember E-Town. Yeah.
So I started there. Their head office was right in the middle of Oxford Street, so it was quite glamorous. And I started as a buyer's assistant, and it was great actually because, as I said, it was kind of in the 80s. Everything was quite glamorous, and the fashion business was just very different to how it is now. And we would, all the people that I worked with, I thought they were really glamorous, and I thought, well, they're quite old, sophisticated. They were probably about 30, but I was, it was really exciting. I wanted to hear all about everything and how did it work, and it was just, I just absolutely loved it. And we all used to go out together, and so we would I just got such funny memories of us all, working late and then staggering off to the wine bar, in Oxford Circus, and sort of staggering home on the bus, and just, oh my God, it was so brilliant. No computers, nothing like that. And I remember on a Monday morning, because we would be looking at the figures, the sold figures, I would be handwriting them in a book. So literally every Monday morning, it's like, you're just writing the figures. It sounds like Victorian times now.
It does.
Crazily old fashioned, but yeah, we didn't have computers. Then
so it's a lot more personable.
Yeah, I suppose you had nothing to compare it to. So I didn't know. I didn't know there could be another way. It didn't.
Yeah.
There wasn't another way.
You didn't question it either, probably.
No, you didn't. You didn't think about it.
It's not like you're thinking, "Where's my computer?"
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I learned so much. I learned so much about that side of the industry because buying, production, and merchandising, and all of that kind of thing. But in the end, I thought, okay, no, I'm going to go back to design, really. So I just ended up going to a company that supplied ETAM. I just, said, I want to work. Can I kind of come and work for you? And so yeah, sort of ended up doing that, and then going to Marks and Spencer's, and I worked there for quite a while, and Planet, East, lots of different high street brands. So yeah, went from designer to junior to senior, and lots of traveling. Traveling. That's partly why I love working at the art school with all the international students and everything, because I spent so many years going to China twice a year, Hong Kong twice a year, going to.
And what kind of things were you doing when you were traveling to China and Hong Kong?
So it partly depended on the company. So when I worked for the big high street companies, we would go all over the world to do, we called it comp shopping. So you'd go and you'd go around the shops and you'd see what was happening and what are people wearing and what are certain brands selling and what colours are coming through. And because as I said, we weren't, you weren't just looking on the computer to see what the catwalks were doing, that didn't exist. And so when I worked for Marks and Spencer's, we would get these big sort of magazines called Collezioni, and they would have all the photographs of the collections and you'd sort of go through them. But things were a lot slower. So you would, we would go to New York and sort of see what people were wearing and see what certain brands that we liked were doing. And you'd sort of say,
it sounds like a lot of fun, going to New York. What are people wearing? Going into the shops. What are they buying?
Yeah.
What are they selling? So it's research, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was shop research, but it was, because in those days, you would go to the States and you would go into, say, J. Crew or Banana Republic or, those stores. None of that was in the UK or in Europe.
Okay.
So there was a difference between high streets in different countries. And as I sort of worked towards the end of my sort of design career, all the high streets started looking a bit the same. But, at the beginning, when I started, it wasn't like that. And every country had a different look, which was fantastic. And so you would see a certain, you'd go to New York to look at, say, tailoring, because they were really good at tailoring. And you would go to LA or Saint-Tropez to look at the print. Or, I mean, it was unbelievable. It was just unbelievable. And again, you'd go to Italy to see the woolen mills and the fabric shops that were the fabric manufacturers that were around Florence, for example. Or, I went to South Korea once looking at polyester, and it's so. Again, everything had a speciality. So you would go to certain places, certain things, and
then that would influence your design.
Yeah,
at home.
Yeah, because it's all about doing research, but it's about communication, isn't it? And it's about you would go and see the fabric manufacturers, because they produce fabric before you start to think about what the fashion will be, because obviously you need the fabric to make the fashion to put in the shops. So you would go to them and say, okay, what's new, what are you looking at, what are people asking for? And yeah, it was just really exciting. It was just all about talking and exchanging ideas, and okay, what's coming in, and what technologies are coming in, and what are the latest things, and who's looking at, what's Dior looking at? Oh, are they, it was all that kind of stuff. And then you'd be looking at the print houses. So you'd be going to look at fabrics, and we would have, and I think it still happens now. So the print designers, they would work in a different way. So they are all at home, like doing their prints, and they send off these sort of square bits of fabric painted and paintings, and all these print companies, they would take around a big suitcase and open this great big suitcase and say, you know, let's look at, and it's like a big book, you're sort of going through prints, and you would say, oh, okay, that's quite a nice, well, I have that one. And you would buy a print, and you would then own that as a company. So Delias, for example, would own a particular flower print from that designer, and so they couldn't sell it to anybody else. You know, so it was things like that. So you were always,
and yet nowadays you go into the high street, and is it just me, or do you see this a very like almost the identical print?
Yeah, because when, you know, like we would, for example, you'd go to Tokyo and you'd buy things in Tokyo, you'd buy garments and samples, and you'd bring them back, and you'd design something around, you know, what you'd bought. But the more traveling people do, and actually the more, you know, you would get street photographers, or, you know, you'd buy a photographic report, for example, so you wouldn't even need to go to Tokyo. So actually, you know, Topshop and Marks and Spencer's and Oasis or whoever, they'd all go and buy the same kind of things and then do the same things with them. And, or you would work with a manufacturer. So, you know, when I used to go to Hong Kong and China, that was to go to see factories, and you would work with a company, and you would do the designs, you'd send them the drawings, and then you'd go out, you know, a few weeks later, a few months later, and they would have all the samples, and you'd work with them on a range. What you would find is that the factories you worked with all the other high street brands. And so yes, this is what I was saying before, is that it started to become that you would go to high street and every shop would have the same things in it, because they were buying things from the same factories. With the computer, so obviously then you can look at a catwalk show this as it's happening, and so it means that everyone looks at the catwalk shows as they're happening. So it means that Zara can have, you know, a Burberry coat before it's even in Burberry.
Yeah.
And so that started to happen.
It's become so fast that and so accessible that there aren't these kind of, so much as these private, especially with the high streets anyway, private deals going on where you have that specific fabric and nobody else.
Actually, I think unless a brand has a very strong identity, they are just not going to survive.
I just wondered, you know, obviously you run the annual sustainability forum at WSA, and talking about sustainability, I'm wondered, after you've worked so long for high street brands, did that initiate your interest in sustainability?
Actually, I think it was probably beforehand, because when I was a teenager, you know, we had no money, and, you know, we didn't really have access to well, there was no fast fashion, but we didn't have access to that kind of stuff. And so I grew up, you know, wearing vintage, or it was just secondhand when I was 18. It wasn't called vintage. You know, it's only a few years later it's called vintage, and it's become something else. But actually, when I was 18, sort of 16, 17, 18, you know, 20, we were wearing vintage because it was a statement, and we could afford it. And so I used to wear like men's suits and waistcoats, and, you know, and it was, you sort of made your own fashion in a way. And I would make clothes, and I would, you know, we would go to like jumble sales and just buy things and cut them up. We were just really creative, because I think a lot of it was just, we didn't have money, because you know, my mum doesn't throw anything away. She used to make our clothes, and we didn't have much, so we understood that everything was precious. And I think I've just always felt that way, really.
Thinking about then sustainability, do you think that the fashion industry is making a genuine effort to be sustainable, or is it just fashionable to be sustainable?
Well, this is a really interesting question. So when I worked at Marks and Spencer's, what I found really interesting was that the way the brand presented itself, quality and care, and what I realized from working there was it wasn't talk, it was genuinely the brand identity. And that made a really big impression on me, actually, because you'd go to a factory and, they were very clear, no child labor. They would have, it would always be regular checks, quality checks. We as designers, we would be going around the factories and looking at people working, so all of that, you knew exactly where things were made, how they were made, who they, you could see the people physically making things. And so all of that actually had a really big impression on me. And
because I think that the most people that don't have that access to see that, they're just buying things and, maybe they don't realize that there's a reality there. There is actually potentially a child making that or bad working conditions. And I think going there and experiencing it and looking at people, you do have more care, you do have more understanding about where that garment has come from and who's made it.
And because I think that one of the things about looking at sustainability, and one of the things that I talk about, when I do lectures and things, is the fact that the consumer and the producer are kept apart. And I think a lot of brands, it is in their interest, it's good for them to keep these things apart, because if you could see exactly who made, how it was made, your garment, when you buy it, it possibly influence what you decide. So I think and it works the other way as well, because for the person making the garment to not really see what our lifestyle, like how privileged we are, is better, for the brand or for the company. So I think a lot of companies have an interest in keeping those things apart, because once you see the whole picture, it can influence you. And I do understand that, because it's such a complicated issue. So, I think you have to understand that we at university, any student that comes to university is already privileged. We're all so privileged as well, that I think that it's easy to forget that if someone only has a few pounds and they want to buy a t-shirt that costs £2, like, who are we to say, no, you can't do that because it wasn't made properly? It's like, how, who are we to say that? So I think I try and look at the subject from a very wide point of view, because I think it's really easy to say, oh, well, I only buy X, or I only do this. But a lot of that comes from privilege. I think that, again, the other thing I find difficult is when people try to blame the consumer. Oh, well, if you want it for £2, well, it's you, it's and that kind of finger pointing. And I really hate that as well, because I think, just if we were given better choices, then we would make better choices. And I think you can't blame the consumer for buying something that's, here is a t-shirt for £2. Well, how can you blame the consumer for saying, oh, thank you, I'll have that? Because actually, I feel we need more legislation, more rules, more laws to actually help.
Because not everyone has the knowledge about where these things come from. So you can't necessarily blame the consumer.
Definitely not. And I've been
although if a consumer was educated in sustainability, had money, and then chose to anyway, then that's different. But it would be very, very difficult to look at that from an individual point of view, whereas a brand obviously has the knowledge of how things are made, and they can be more sustainable if they choose to be. How can we do better? How can brands do better?
I mean, I think it will take a collected effort.
Mm-hmm.
There are people sort of saying, you know, we should have laws that make products recyclable, all products, or there should be maybe laws that say, okay, you as a company, you produce, I don't know, a pair of jeans or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
but you are responsible for that product for the whole of its life.
Okay.
And when the consumer is finished with it, then you take it back and you disassemble it and you do something with it. And, you know, so things like that, where you have, you know, we talk about this circular economy.
Okay.
And I think that kind of action could be something that's successful, because, you know, because when you think
there might have to be some kind of reward system though for the consumer to bring the clothes back potentially.
Yeah, or I mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because I've always said, you know, I do the sustainability forum, and you know, my aim, or what I would like, you know, in an ideal dream world, would be that I don't have to do the forum, because it's not something we're even talking about. It's just something that everyone does without even thinking it becomes something that you don't even make decisions about. I think that, for example, if, you know, because I do look at M&S as quite a good example, I think. And so when you look at, say, the food in M&S, when you buy anything in Marks and Spencer's that has eggs in it, they're free range eggs. There is no alternative. And so you don't have to even think about it. You go into M&S, you buy something with eggs in it. You don't even have to think, oh, is it? Or because they've taken that choice away. And I feel like that's quite a good kind of example.
But then, as you say, with the example for example with M&S are probably one of the most expensive supermarkets. So
yeah, how
would that go down for somewhere like Iceland or Asda? You know, those sorts of supermarkets. You're thinking, you know, that sandwich is more expensive. You know, I think the issue is, how would it work on the lower scale?
No, and I completely agree with you. And that is something that's the question that comes up. And that's the thing that's so difficult. The amount of money those corporations have, those companies make for their shareholders and for their, you know, chairman and whatever. You know what, if they are saying, okay, we want to sell a t-shirt for £1, or we want to sell a sandwich for 50p, or, you know, then you say, okay, well, because their answer is always, oh, well, we're giving the consumer choice. It's what the consumer wants. So I kind of thought, well, okay, then why don't you have not almost like a green tax, but it's almost like the opposite. So if you want to be unsustainable, then you pay more tax.
Okay.
You're still giving people a choice, but you know, you're paying a bit more to us, you know, to the government for it. And if you want to be greener, then, you know, you pay less tax. So it's almost like a reverse green tax. And I think that where, you know, something like that could level the playing field. I mean, I don't think it'll ever happen, because,
well, you know, you say that, but then I thought of the sugar tax.
Yeah,
which, okay, it's not the same as necessarily environmental sustainability issues, but they've, you know, in a way, they're punishing for the eating unhealthily, which has health issues in itself. So it's not impossible. It's not an idea that's not unheard of. So in terms of your course at WSA, do you teach the students about these issues, and does that influence their work, the course?
So again, that's something that it's quite difficult in a way, because I'm running a master's program. And the point of a master's program is mastery, you know, it's mastering your subject. And so the students come to us with their own background, and it's not a program like a BA where you're teaching them for several years, and it's a bit more working together with the students. Okay. But so I wouldn't force them to be sustainable or anything like that, but I mean, first of all, I'm trying to build the reputation that, if you're interested in sustainability, come to us. And I'm definitely seeing applications where students are interested. So that's amazing. Okay. And then it is something that I talk about in general. And I mean, for me, that is good design, is being sustainable and being responsible. In the first semester, we do a project called the White Project, which is a zero waste project. Okay. And we use a material called Tyvek, which is recyclable. It's quite cheap. It's not a normal fashion fabric. It's fabulous. It's a bit like a washable paper. Okay. And actually they make hazmat suits, so it's obviously everyone knows the fabric now, and so we use that with the students, and they can use as much as they want. They can use 5 meters, 10, 3, doesn't matter what they use. They have to use the whole thing. They cannot waste or get rid of a single thing. So if they cut something out, they have to use that. And so that project, which is it's a brilliant project, and because it's white, it means that they really have to think of the design, what's the design of this garment, and it becomes an exhibition as well. So it's a brilliant project. But
so that's already teaching them. I mean, the first project is about zero waste, and that kind of sets the tone really for.
Yeah, but also it's about, what's really lovely about it is you're working in a slightly different way. Because it's zero waste, you can't just draw, you can't just design and draw, because when you're drawing, there is generally waste when you make a pattern. So they have to work in a different way. They have to actually get the paper, get the fabric and drape it on the stand or turn it, have a look at it. And also when I introduce the project, I talk about, I mean, obviously the first clothing that was ever worn would have just been square bits of fabric, wrapped around you, and animals, whatever. So when you think about, or kimonos, we talk about kimonos a lot as well, or fishermen's trousers, those kind of garments that are made, they are just automatically made with no waste. And so as they're making and working with their hands, I'm, hoping it's all going in there. So, and actually some of them, because after that they do their final major project and they spend quite a long time doing that. Some of them do okay, I'm going to go zero waste, or I'm going to look at sustainability. So it definitely does come through a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, Delia, thank you so much. It's been really, really lovely to talk to you about this. Thank you.
Thank you.